Hey everyone, I get a lot of questions on, global expansion when it comes to your online businesses. And I just kind of wanted to chat about this a little bit, talk about some of the pros, but more importantly, talk about some of the huge challenges that people face that they kind of overlook at the initial steps. So first of all, with global expansion, my experience with this is I've sold with my personal stores to over 25 countries in the world. And with my client stores, we've reached over 40 countries in this world. So the aspect of scalability is absolutely there. It's very manageable, and this is something that my marketing firm really pushes themselves towards as a competitive advantage, because not a lot of firms focus on that, and not a lot of firms have done that themselves. So we've learned quite a bit from it. Now, first of all, the pros. Logistics are actually becoming pretty simple of this. People think that it's so complex to get set up there. No, there's drop shipping centers, there's fulfillment centers there. There's all sorts of methods that we can actually get implemented in another country rather easily. It's not as challenging as we think. It's pretty much the same now as getting set up in your own backyard. So that's something that I always say, don't worry about that hurdle. It's actually not as difficult as people would say. The path has already been created, basically. There's been other people do this. There's been other people teaching it online now. You have resources to reach out to. 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, e-commerce businesses, it was very challenging because those that did it kept those secrets so close to them. But now so many people have done it that it's not really becoming as big of a secret. So you can actually find a lot of knowledge on these spaces, which is very, very important. This is the biggest one that I really push to my clients especially, is you're hedging your risk. So whenever I'm working with a brick and mortar store especially, the first thing that I want them to do is I want them to get online as well, because now we have two different markets. The online market versus the brick and mortar market are completely different from a logistics cost perspective, from a customer base, you name it, it's very, very different. So when we go online and we're going global, now we're even hedging our risk even further. So yes, US might be crushing it. I've seen, and from firsthand experience, right, a market that you're absolutely dominating, you're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales, can kind of fall apart in months, right? It's just how it becomes saturated. When you hit that saturation point, you're just done, right? Or someone else, a big competitor comes in. So we want to make sure that we diversify, and that's kind of by country as well. Another thing that we can do with hedging our risk, and a lot of people don't think about this at the beginning, but we can actually hedge currency risk by doing this too, which is phenomenal. So what do I mean by this? With my first major company, we started selling in US, Canada, and United Kingdom. So we had 3 different currencies coming in. Now, US dollar was absolutely dominating. So when we found that the Brexit was happening, we switched our European store to charge US dollars. So we actually hedged some currency risk there as well, and it didn't affect our sales. So that was kind of a neat example where we actually ended up coming with more money in the door. We stayed with the euro when the euro was strong, and we got away with that. And then as soon as they started to dip down, we switched to the US dollar and actually hedged our currency risk as well, which is something that I don't see a lot of people thinking about in the future, but definitely, it's something that we got to consider, especially if you're from Canada. We don't really dominate the markets from a money perspective, so we need to always be looking at other countries' currencies as a way to get an advantage, right? Which is huge. We can get an extra 30 points on our money essentially, because especially with low cost goods, if it's a $25 product, generally speaking, you can charge $25 Canadian, and you can also charge $25 US. From a consumer's mindset, it's the same price. Canadians are used to shopping in US dollars because we do it a lot online. Americans are not used to shopping in Canadian dollars, and it actually kind of scares them, which is funny. They just don't realize that they're actually getting a much better deal. So I always charge US dollars on a lot of my stores, and my Canadian customers pay it. So again, I'm making an extra 30% on my money. That's what I would have been charging anyways, except in Canadian terms. So that's a huge, huge advantage. You have massive exposure, you have massive reach. Now, this, I've already talked about this a little bit, getting a huge customer base, hedging your risk, things like that. But when we have ads that are running globally, for example, your reach for dollar amount is going to be much cheaper. It's no different than if I'm trying to advertise to 100 people or 10,000 people. Those 100 people, it's going to cost me more because I'm advertising to a smaller audience. If I advertise to the same audience except a larger audience, same interest, larger audience, my cost per click is going to go down naturally. Just because of the pool of clicks I have available to me, it's going to cost me a lot less. So now when you have a post online, the chances of it going viral A, they increase, but B, it also becomes less expensive for them to increase. So it's a huge advantage, right? Because the more people that are clicking our ads on Google, the more people liking our posts on Facebook, LinkedIn, things like that, that's the more people seeing it. So it's very, very powerful. This is the biggest thing, is I talk about a lot reward versus workload. Now, I understand that there's a huge workload that comes with global expansion, right? There is. And this could probably be in the challenges as well. There is a huge workload increase. But when I look at my workload of expanding a company in the US or in Canada, my workload's really, really high and my reward is really, really high. But when I look at global expansion, I've probably already done it here. Same if you have a brick and mortar store going to e-commerce. This is my exact same argument to my clients all the time. It's a marginal increase in workload considering the reward, right? So we already have content. In a lot of your guys' cases, you guys already have content. If you're brick and mortar, you have content that you can publish online. If you're already online, you have content that you can publish around the world, right? So that's the biggest time-consuming factor, is getting all of that established, getting some of your logistics stream established, getting suppliers established. So that workload increase, yes, it does increase, but the reward aspect is way bigger than the actual workload increase. So it's very justified. But let's chat about these challenges. These are kind of things that I don't think people necessarily think about at the time, and they think it's going to be a lot easier than it is. Now, biggest one from all of my experience is knowing your audience. Now, this is a classic example. A lot of you guys know fitness was the biggest niche that I've ever been in. I crushed the fitness niche globally. So that's what I kind of all use my examples about, and I think it's something that we can all on some level relate to. So when we talk fitness, and I'm selling something in America, especially a consumeristic, we always want to be better than each other kind of society. If I'm selling a product in the fitness niche, I can get the biggest human I can possibly find, or the hottest girl I can possibly find, and that's going to be really resonate with my customers, right? That's the biggest advantage in America is we want to get the big names, we want to get the bulky guys, we want to get the hot women. That's huge here because we're very, very competitive with each other, and we want to be better than everyone else. But when I look at some of the European societies, even Australia especially, that doesn't work, right? For those of you guys that have traveled globally, whenever I'm traveling with my friends or something like that, we get stopped on the street a lot in these countries because we're so big, right? And that's not a thing there. They don't really like that. So if we don't know our audience and we make mistakes like that, we're going to think that country's not good for us, but really it's just our ad content, right? We're not tailoring it correctly. Instead of promoting you want to be big and bulky, it's lean. You want to look good. You want to have muscles. You want to fit in, right? That's the biggest thing, is fitting in those cultures. One of the best examples is Australia for that, right? The fitness level is very, very high there. Everyone is lean, everyone's skinny. It's not to look better than the next person, it's to fit in with society. Whereas in America, we tend to work out to look better than the next person and not fit in with the traditional society, essentially. That's kind of the different mindsets. And I know that sounds a little strange, but that's huge when we talk about global expansion that I think a lot of people miss in their industry, is figure out your consumer really quickly and then tailor your ad content towards that. I always encourage my clients and myself, I submerge myself in their local platforms, like blogs and things like that. If I'm going in, I'm entering a new niche that I've never touched before, so I have no experience, and no one in my ad agency's touched before, I really stress that. I want us to be submerging ourselves, learning their culture a little bit before I produce ads, because it could be a little bit, it could be a tiny little hurdle that is so easy to overcome, but a lot of people overlook and think this country's not going to be good for me. But it could be as simple as the wording in your ad content. That is literally what can be make or break, right? So something to think about. The other thing is bidding strategically. Now, when we enter a new avenue, right, for example, my digital marketing agency, I know what dollar amount in Canada and the US is worth it for me to get someone to my website, right? So maybe I'm willing to spend, $20 or $30 a click, right? That's not what it is, don't worry. But let's say that's what I'm willing to spend here. Now I know when I go overseas, I shouldn't be allowing myself to spend that kind of money, because especially in a country like Germany, let's say, where I have some clients, in Germany, they're not willing to make this transition to e-commerce full force. So a client to me is not worth as much in Germany as they are in the US. So I can't be bidding the exact same way there. And a lot of the times people get greedy when they're entering these new countries because they want clientele, which I get, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. When you're entering a new market, if you're breaking even or better, that's amazing. I always say break even is awesome. You're getting free data. But think about that. Don't just get greedy and then overbid and then realize, 10 months down the road or 6 months down the road, this country's not making me any money because of my greed, right? That's a big thing. Fraud increases. This is a huge one. When we go overseas, fraud is massive, right? There's a lot more fake credit cards. There's a lot more things going on like that. So fraud is something that we have to watch out for. And generally speaking, we just have to pay a little bit extra to our payment providers. And then we get insurance on this essentially. So you basically, at the end of the day, you want to tack about 3% onto your bottom line is a pretty good estimate from everything that I've done. And that'll kind of hedge you against a lot of the fraud risk. They'll cover a lot of those costs. Saturation factor. This is another huge one that I see. So when I start a business in the US especially, if it takes me 6 months of breaking even, I'll continue doing it because I know I'm getting so much data that I'm going to be good in the future. I'm building a brand, things like that. But if I use that same budget and I do that in Australia, for example, which is a very good market, very similar trends to the US, it's awesome. So if I do that and I have that same strategy and same mindset, I'm actually saturating that country a lot faster, right? It's dramatically smaller than a place like the US, especially their online consumer base. So that's something that we have to look out for. Take their population in your niche, right? It's simple to go to Google Trends or Facebook audiences. And if you have an audience of 20 million in the US and you have an audience of 500,000 or a million in Australia, it's going to be about that proportion. So we can't spend that much time breaking even or better to build that because now you're just going to break even and then you're not really going to be left with that chunk of profits at the end, which is something that I see so many people miss. So instead of just attacking little countries like that, attack groups of countries that are very, very similar, right? So when I look at Europe, I don't want to put, Germany and Russia and England in the same basket, right? That's not really beneficial for me to take data on them all as one, right? But if you find similar countries and we increase that population, now if I have an audience of 3 million people, I'm going to be willing to break even a little bit longer than I would just advertising in one piece of Europe where they only have 500,000 consumers. So that's another great thing. But ultimately, when I'm talking about global expansion too, guys, the biggest advantage is find someone who's done it before, and that will isolate a lot of these costs because it's a much easier market to compete in once you know what you're doing. But a lot of people don't know what they're doing and they want to learn for themselves, which I encourage a lot of the times. When it comes to global expansion, get someone on your team, right? Hire an agency who's done it lots before and chat with them about it. This will bring your costs down a lot more because we don't really have as much of a learning period accessible and still leaving ourselves with profits. Where is your audience? This is another great one is people just assume that they're using the same platforms as us and they don't research their social media platforms. When we talk about a place like Russia, they kind of have, I don't even know what it's called. I use it, but I don't know what it's called. I don't know how to pronounce it. They have a different version of Facebook essentially. So if you're using Facebook ads, you can use them the same way there, but it's a different platform. So it doesn't really work well for us. For example, so we got to know what blogs they hang out on, things like that. Is my audience watching Ellen or are they watching their version of Ellen, right? That's something that we need to figure out and find those kind of crosses in the market essentially. Are they consumeristic, right? I already chatted about this a little bit, but consumeristic societies are willing to blow money here on low-cost products. This is going to be a little bit counterintuitive, and I think it's actually a very interesting point. Consumeristic products in the US that work best are, $20, $30, $40 in price. Now, those are just kind of products that in a lot of the European places they don't even look at because they don't think it's good enough quality-wise that they'd want to buy it. So a lot of the times I actually have to increase my prices in Europe to compete just for them to even think about buying my product because they think about those low-cost, China quality products as pointless. So that's kind of interesting, but that's very niche specific, and again, that's a quick test. Experience helps a lot there, but again, not too much. Customer service. Know that there's going to be a huge barrier. Hire someone that is bilingual. Go overseas for this. It shouldn't cost you a bunch of money. It should be very cheap. Under $8 an hour, $4 an hour is probably a good estimate. But get someone who actually speaks their language because you're going to get complaints. You're going to get a lot of things going on, and you need someone who can actually translate that. And then the last thing I wanted to chat about was know that country's quality and standard of care. The biggest example of this, and this was one of my mistakes, we were shipping goods and we were shipping them within 5 days in Europe, right? And, talk about America, talk about Canada, that's very acceptable. People are fine with that. In Europe, it's weird if they don't get a product within 2 days. So they don't actually, a lot of the times use tracking codes. They don't care for them about tracking their orders, but they get their products within 48 hours. And a lot of places actually offer 40 or 24-hour express shipping. Now, some places in the States do, Canada not really, but that's a huge thing there. So if you go into this market and you don't know that, you're going to get a lot of people complaining to you on day 3 going, hey, where's my products? And really, really angry customers destroying your online presence, commenting on all your posts, things like that, because they think that they're getting screwed around. But really, in fact, you're just not used to their standard of care. So this goes for everything, warranties, things like that. But these are kind of my list of just kind of a quick little overview of global expansion. With this being said, I definitely want to push you guys to do it. The hedge aspect is the biggest aspect, right? Because your market locally can fall apart at any time. Depending on the industry that you're in, you're experiencing, tariffs and things like that. There's government influence in a lot of this stuff, especially now, currently. There's a lot of government influence. So that can dramatically affect your bottom line. So maybe temporarily you want to shift your marketing efforts a little bit more overseas, which again is something that we did a lot. A great example of this is seasonality, right? In the fitness niche in North America, there's a huge seasonality index, right? When we talk Christmas, New Year's resolution, things like that, Black Friday, the industry's huge. It's massive. But when we talk summer, when people, they've got their summer bodies now, or it's too late in some circumstances like me, they've got their summer bodies, right? And so now they don't really care about fitness as much until the winter and the off season. That's a time where we can push our ad content overseas, same marketing budget, have generally the same revenue coming in year round. Because a lot of us, it's not really beneficial for us, especially from a books perspective, to have seasonality indexes in our revenue. But if we isolate that risk as well, there's still going to be some seasonality indexes because North America is the biggest market for us. But we can isolate them a little bit more so we can keep staff on payroll that we normally wouldn't have accepted before. That's one of the biggest advantages to you guys. So think about this. I hope this makes sense, and I hope you guys are encouraged to expand globally. If you guys are a brick and mortar store, this isn't something that you guys shouldn't not consider. Think about getting online, and then in 6 months you guys can expand globally as well, right? If you guys have any questions with that as well, please message me, right? My agency is accepting more clients on this. This isn't a sales pitch, but we are. Message me if you have any questions, and I can maybe direct you in the right fashion. Again, if you like this content, please like this video. See you later, guys.